Canada and Indonesia's trade expansion, a new strategy to reduce reliance on the United States. Introduction. For decades, Canada has relied heavily on the United States as its primary trading partner. The geographical proximity, shared border, and free trade agreements have kept Canada's economy deeply tied to the American market. However, shifting global politics, trade wars, and an evolving geo-economic landscape have compelled Canada to diversify its trading routes. Against this backdrop, Canada has announced a new plan to expand its trade relations with Indonesia. The move is not only aimed at increasing exports but also at reducing Canada's long-standing dependence on the U.S. Background: Canada-U.S. Economic Partnership. Canada and the United States share one of the largest bilateral trade partnerships in the world. More than 70% of Canada's exports go to the U.S. Energy, automobiles, agricultural products, and minerals are the leading sectors that depend on the American market. U.S. companies, in turn, invest heavily in Canadian industries. But this dependence has also become a vulnerability for Canada. Any change in American trade policy or imposition of tariffs directly impacts the Canadian economy. For instance, under former President Donald Trump, tariffs on steel and aluminum dealt a major blow to Canadian industries. This highlighted the risks of over-reliance on a single market and strengthened the argument for diversifying trade. Why Indonesia? Indonesia is Southeast Asia's largest economy and a member of the G20. With a population of over 280 million, it presents a vast consumer market. The country is rich in natural resources such as palm oil, rubber, coffee, coal, and minerals. For Canada, Indonesia represents both an opportunity and a challenge. Canadian agricultural products, technology, energy, and educational services could find strong demand in the Indonesian market. Conversely, Canada could benefit from Indonesia's supply of natural resources. Although trade relations already exist, they are modest compared to Canada's economic ties with the U.S. In 2024, Canada-Indonesia bilateral trade was valued at roughly $5 billion, a small figure compared to Canada-U.S. trade, which stands at over $700 billion annually. Yet experts believe this partnership has significant potential for growth. Recent developments. Canada's Minister of Trade recently announced that the government is working on a comprehensive strategy to deepen trade with Indonesia. The initiative includes several key measures. Negotiating a free trade agreement (FTA), both countries are exploring the possibility of a formal trade deal to lower tariffs and remove barriers. Boosting investment cooperation. Canadian companies are expected to invest in Indonesia's energy and infrastructure projects. Education and technology collaboration. Plans include Canadian universities opening campuses in Indonesia and joint ventures in tech innovation. Agriculture and food exports. Canada is seeking to expand its export of wheat, pulses, and dairy products into the Indonesian market. Expert opinions. Economists argue that this decision could prove beneficial in the long run. Overdependence on the U.S. leaves Canada vulnerable to policy shifts, trade disputes, and political disagreements. Diversifying into Asian markets like Indonesia could help stabilize Canada's economy. However, experts also caution that Indonesia is not an easy market to penetrate. Bureaucracy, corruption, and trade barriers remain persistent issues. Moreover, Canadian firms will face stiff competition from countries like China and Australia, which already maintain strong footholds in Indonesia. Political and geostrategic dimensions. The decision carries more than economic weight. Indonesia is a key member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN). Strengthening ties with Indonesia could open doors for Canada across the broader ASEAN region, which is one of the fastest-growing economic blocs in the world. Additionally, diversifying trade is seen as part of Canada's broader foreign policy goal, reducing dependency on U.S. influence and gaining greater autonomy in global decision-making. Public reaction. Canada's business community has largely welcomed the move. Agricultural producers, energy companies, and technology firms are particularly enthusiastic about access to Indonesia's large market. On the other hand, some labor unions have expressed concerns. They fear that a free trade agreement could place pressure on local industries, leading to job losses and wage stagnation. Critics argue that without proper safeguards, Canadian workers might not see the same benefits as corporations. Future prospects. If a Canada-Indonesia free trade agreement is finalized, analysts estimate that bilateral trade could triple to $15 billion within 5 years. Such growth would give Canada new export markets, reduce its reliance on U.S. demand, and strengthen its global economic standing. Nevertheless, progress will not be immediate. Trade negotiations are complex and time-consuming, and political and regulatory hurdles are expected. Both governments will need to commit to transparency and long-term cooperation for the partnership to succeed. Conclusion: Canada's decision to expand trade with Indonesia represents a strategic pivot in its economic and foreign policy. While challenges remain, from bureaucratic barriers in Indonesia to domestic concerns in Canada, the potential rewards are significant. By reducing dependence on the U.S. and cultivating ties with emerging economies like Indonesia, Canada is seeking to secure a more resilient and diversified future for its economy.